Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowering Leaders podcast. At Aleda, we are passionate about inspiring connections and creating a world of collaboration. Our signature program, Aleda Connect, curates groups of 5 to 6 leaders from diverse backgrounds in sport, industry, social venture and the arts who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
It's been amazing. Here you are on this Zoom call, feeling within the first session like you intimately know these people and care for them. And then all of a sudden realising that even though you're in totally different industries, we're all going through the same thing, or we've been through it and we can help each other, or there's just this hurdle that you can't see past, and then you share it with the group and there's 5 answers in 40 minutes and you think, I have not slept for 2 weeks thinking about that. Like, how is this possible?
So you're listening to stories and the breadcrumbs of what makes success, and I constantly get something out of these Zoom calls and catch-ups because we're all living the same stuff, aren't we?
Extraordinary people with extraordinary experience. What happens there is magical.
The Empowering Leaders podcast is proudly brought to you by Victoria University, where cutting-edge sports and exercise science facilities like heat chambers, performance labs, and altitude environments mean VU is ranked 7th in the world for sports science. VU, uniquely you. As always, a big thank you to Jason Nicholas and his team at Temper Bedding, a mattress like no other. If you enjoy listening to the Empowering Leaders podcast, be sure to subscribe, and please, if you have a moment, we would love you to leave a review so we can reach more listeners and empower more leaders. Few people have dedicated their lives to protecting the planet with as much passion and creativity as Natalie Kyriacou. From Melbourne to the world stage, she is the founder of My Green World, the mind behind the interactive World of the Wild app, and a champion of conservation through education and curiosity. She's been recognised with the Medal of the Order of Australia, featured in Forbes 30 Under 30, and contributes to global environmental strategy through roles with Kerr Australia, the Foundation for National Parks and Wildlife, UNESCO's Green Citizens, and the X Prize Biodiversity Brain Trust. Her upcoming book, Nature's Last Dance, Tales of Wonder in an Age of Extinction, has been described as the most important environmental book of our time. Natalie doesn't just talk about change, she brings it to life by inviting us to see the wild, understand it, and fight for it. Natalie, great to spend some time with this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Luke.
Everything I read and hear about you is just full of passion. Can you tell us about what sparked that passion for wildlife and conservation? Was there a defining moment for you?
I am very passionate about what I do, and I think I've been that way since childhood, and it just never changed. The usual stuff. I spent my childhood camping. My family always took me camping. My dad used to, on the weekends that we didn't go camping as a family, my dad would pitch a tent for us in the backyard and we would pretend that we were in the forest and, that there were bears outside. And so I was a very outdoorsy kid. And then I was also just curious and quite sensitive. I liked animals. I liked wildlife. I cared about the environment. And so I went to study journalism because I wanted to write about environmental crimes and human rights abuses. But while I was studying, I spent quite a bit of time abroad, particularly in Borneo, and I had some encounters with orangutans. One was when an orangutan stole my underwear, but there was I had these strange, profound experiences with wildlife. And so when I returned to Australia, I thought, I might just start a passion project, and it's going to, I'll try to educate people and engage young people in wildlife and environmental conservation. And then I got really wrapped up in that. And so here I am.
It would be remiss of me not to go back and ask about an orangutan stealing your underwear, Nellie. I don't think I can let that one go through.
I really glazed over that one, didn't I?
I have to get some more detail on that.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to spend a few months living in the Bornean jungle, and I was working in an orangutan rehabilitation centre. So it was mostly orangutans that had been orphaned because their habitats had been destroyed to make way for palm oil. Often their mothers were killed. And so our job was to help them thrive back in the wild and relocate them, often give them medical treatment. That I didn't give them medical treatment, the experts did. But I was living in this little guest house on the edge of the jungle, and I walked into my guest house one day and there was an orangutan sitting on my balcony, and I had my washing out on the balcony hanging out to dry, and he had my gym pants draped around his neck and was holding my underwear, and he must have been watching me because he was wringing them out like he was doing the washing. And so I don't know why I did this. I've stormed up to him and tried to snatch my underwear back. And he didn't want to give them back. So we ended up having this tug-of-war contest, and then he defiantly put them over his head like a necklace and then ran back into the jungle. And so my underwear are still in Borneo. I have the funniest photos of this orangutan wearing my underwear around his neck, looking quite defiant and triumphant. But I never saw them again. But that orangutan, he kept coming back. So he came back and stole various things. He tried to break into our bedrooms. And it's a bittersweet story because he was semi-rehabilitated. So his mother had been killed to make way for palm oil plantations, leaving him an orphan. And the rehabilitation centre had tried to rehabilitate him, but he'd become too accustomed to human interference. And so he never quite returned fully into the wild, which is why he was ransacking my wardrobe.
And you talk about those memories and interactions with these incredible animals and such a human experience, as you said, with connecting and the humour. And when you see people do cruel things to animals or destroy their habitat and the devastation to it, it must be emotional for you, given how well versed you are on what happens in this space.
Yeah, it is. And I'm quite sensitive, and I like that. I want to be sensitive because I want to keep caring. I don't want to switch off the more I care and feel, I feel like it's the more I can do. But I also learned that I don't like placing blame on, it's not really an individual problem. I remember going to Borneo and thinking that people in the palm oil industry must be bad people. And I had this black and white view of good versus bad. And it's just not the case. The people that I met in Borneo who worked in the palm oil industry, it was their livelihoods. That's the way the economy works. And that was how they made money. They cared about their family. They cared about their communities. They cared about nature. They care about the same things that everybody else does, but they need to make a living. And so it just opened my eyes to the nuances of this sort of intersection between, environment and human rights and community livelihoods. And so that's why I'm really passionate about exploring how we can empower communities to drive better environmental protections. And I'm very cautious against blaming, individual workers or individual communities for any crimes against nature, because what I see this is, it's a systemic problem. It's the way that we have structured our economies, our political systems that reward these sort of behaviours.
It's a really balanced view that you've got, Natalie. Often it's really black and white, isn't it? You're an environmentalist or you're into habitat destruction, and there's no middle ground or no space to meet. And it's why your story is such a powerful one. You've been a great leader for it, and you write beautifully about it, and you're practically doing things. How do you see your leadership in the environmental space as being maybe different from traditional forms of leadership?
I'm one voice of many, and I think I just see mine as being experimental. I understand that we need to have different messages for different people. I don't want to live in a world where we don't have a healthy planet for children, and I think that we need to, in order to have the most impact, we need to recognise the different contexts and experiences of people. If I'm talking about the environment, I'm going to be having a very different conversation with a farmer than I might with a university student, for example. And so I think it's about experimenting with different styles of communication, trying to relate to people. I think change comes when we actually can relate to somebody, to empathise with them, and then build a sense of community. I don't think that change happens by, yelling at each other in the comments section of a social media post. So where possible, I try to engage people. I try to think from their perspective, try to think with a bit of empathy about, why they think the way they do. Why do they have those opinions? What was their background, their upbringing? What shaped their lives and views? And so I try to do that. I don't always get it right. It is a little bit experimental, but ultimately I just care. I want good outcomes for the environment. I want good outcomes for communities. I do what I think is best, but it might not be right. We'll see.
Yeah, I love the way that you think about it. As you said, it's often easier, isn't it, to just the blame part of it is the default for a lot of us. It's that you're wrong, I'm right, but it often doesn't lead to any collaboration that seems to work. So I love your attitude to it. If you could shift the mindset of just one thing in the broader public, though, when it comes to the environment, is there one thing you'd like people to understand more than anything else?
I think when someone says environment, I can see a lot of, when I talk about the environment, I can see people's eyes glaze over a little bit. And I think they immediately think, okay, tree hugger, or, that's something that's noble, but it's not my thing. And it's really interesting because we don't do that when we talk about technology. I mean, if I said I was, worked in tech, people wouldn't think I'm a coder and that's, this niche thing. Technology is something we understand that impacts all of our lives. We're all interested in it. We all engage with it day to day. And I find it interesting how differently we talk about the environment versus technology, when the environment is the thing that allows us to breathe. It puts food on our table. It builds our homes. It brings us joy. There's, our hobbies are within the environment. And so it's really strange that we talk about it like it's a niche topic. And so what I hope I can do, and even what I hope I can do with this book, is demonstrate all the quirky, strange, beautiful ways that nature actually shapes our lives, our economies, how it's built empires, how it's caused wars, how it's dictated policies, how it has built our healthcare system, how it has at times cured cancer, some forms of cancer. So I think I would like for people to understand that this isn't niche, that actually everybody is an environmental advocate. They just don't know it yet.
That's a great way to frame it again, isn't it? It's the people that want to deny that there's any challenges with our environment, whatever side you fall on, I find that an interesting one, isn't it? Because we all share the planet. Surely the health of that planet is something that all of us understand at some level is a good thing to protect it. However you might go about it, Natalie, is probably where the debate can lay. But is that one thing to just try and, as you just said then, get people to understand that the health of our planet is intrinsic to everyone's survival going forward? Is that a frustration for you that we can't even maybe get to that point where we all agree there is something worthwhile to fight for?
It is. It's quite frustrating. I mean, we are the only species that actually argues over whether we should maintain the conditions necessary for our own survival. So I find that odd and frustrating. It's like arguing over, whether or not we believe in or think having a heart or a functioning nervous system is a good thing. So to me, this is the thing that it's our existence. So I do find that frustrating. I find it frustrating that we have been having these environmental debates for over a century, and that they seem to be getting more divided. And I think that we all play a role in this division. But when we start that's why I like talking about nature. When we start talking about things like, if you're a farmer, you care about the health of your soil. If you are a football player, you are very aware of the weather conditions around you, of heat stroke, rising temperatures. If you a surfer, you care about the ocean. And so if climate change or, environment isn't resonating with people, take it back to, a personal level. Do you like going to the national park? Do you like taking your kids on safari? Or do you like playing sport outdoors? Do you like fishing? Those sort of things. So maybe it's about having stories.
Natalie, you've been able to turn this passion that started camping in the backyard with your family and falling in love with nature into real-world impact. Have you got some advice for young leaders listening to this who want to make real-world impact, how to potentially go about it?
Do you know what? I don't know if I'm the best person to give advice, because I I remember the reason I got rejected from all of the jobs that I applied for when I was in my late teenage years. And then on one occasion, I actually got rejected from a job I didn't even apply for. And then I became a full-time volunteer, and I was just filled with passion, but I didn't make much money or any money really. I had to move back in with my parents at one stage to start up my initiative. I was selling everybody's clothes and having garage sales. So I had the privilege of, if I couldn't earn money, I still had my parents' place to live at while I was young. I know not everybody has that privilege. I knew that there was a lot of rungs in the ladder before I became homeless, for example. So my advice, if it was based on my own experience, is to stay true to your values and let passion drive a lot of your work. I think that what I'm most proud of with my career is I don't feel that I have ever gone against my values. And I know that that's a fortunate position to be in. But I felt like I've stayed true to myself. I've always been myself. And there were times when I thought, okay, maybe being myself isn't that much of a good thing. But then now it's sort of turned out that it was a good thing. I just tried to stick to, who I am as a person, and everyone's different. But I do think that if you stay true to yourself, that's a pretty good guiding light.
Such a great answer, Natalie. And I love the privilege of doing these interviews. You see the patterns that come up, and that is something that people that you sit there with the success you're having, they're really clear on their values. And I had the great privilege of speaking to Curtis McGrath, who was a soldier in Afghanistan who lost his legs tragically, has gone on to be one of the great Paralympic athletes of all time. But listening to Curtis talk about how values have been everything to him and the success that he's had, and that continuation of values driving a happy and successful life is such a great story to tell. I look at the things you're doing on the world stage now, as I mentioned in the intro, working with Kerr Australia and UNESCO and the X Prize Brain Trust. Can you tell us about the global stage and what's that been like for you?
It's been fascinating. Just how different regions and the progress and the way that they think about problems, and looking at different countries and how they have to engage their populations, particularly on environmental issues. So in Europe, for example, most European countries are far more advanced than Australia is, just even in the conversations about the environment. There's no real debate about whether climate change, exists, whether humans cause it, or it's more the debate is about what sort of solutions are best. In the US at the moment, there is more of a denial, and they're facing really challenging times in talking about climate change. And so for me, working with these global institutions has been really eye-opening and helped me hone my own messages of how do we engage with different people with different experiences. It's been really fascinating, but also particularly with Kerr Australia, it's that intersection between human rights and the environment. And so harm to the environment is often harm to communities. When environmental disaster strikes, whether it's a bushfire or a flood, it is the poorest and most marginalised people that are often the most heavily impacted. And so it's, I think working around the world has given me a really, a much better understanding of the ways that the environment impacts people differently, and how often we don't actually hear the voices of the most marginalised people in our conversations about the environment. For example, Pacific Island nations, they have some extraordinary leaders who are really driving change for the environment, but rarely do we hear them. They don't grace the front page of our newspapers. There's stories of incredible wildlife carers and rescuers who dedicate their lives to protecting, for example, Australia's species during bushfire. They stay up for 22 hours straight, looking after our species that are so prized around the world, and we don't hear their stories. And so I think working with these global institutions has allowed me to hear more stories, really, more stories that I wouldn't usually hear from, a mainstream media or even on social media.
We all are born different. As we grow, The experiences we have develop into outlooks uniquely our own, charting our life's course. No one sees an idea, opinion, or opportunity like you. And no one sees you like VU. Victoria University. Uniquely you.
At Aleda, our signature program, Aleda Connect, is something we're really passionate and proud of. We bring together groups of 5 to 6 people around the globe from diverse backgrounds, sport, industry, social venture and the arts. We come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
The thing that I've loved about it is not just the meetings that we have with our group, it's the thinking that you do for days and days afterwards. Someone says something and it sparks a thought, and I found that I would go back and look at things that I was doing in a different light. Within my sport and within women's sport, I'm just someone who I try to lead by keeping people talking about the issues. There's times when I think the person I'm trying to convince is not listening to me. It actually got me thinking about, okay, this is how I need to address my communication with them. So it was so valuable, and the little group that we've got is great, and I'm really looking forward to sort of continuing to connect with them into the future because we're all so very different. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it.
You've been really creative in the way you've harnessed technology to share your message and connect people with nature, all of us. And it's an interesting one for me, and it's a world where screens often feel like they pull us away from nature. How have you seen technology maybe as being more part of the solution for the environment rather than part of the problem?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. So I years ago I built this app, and it was called World of the Wild, and essentially it was like Sims, but kids could build their own world, and they could rescue wildlife. They could compete with each other in educational pop quizzes to learn more about wildlife. But each species in the app represented a real-life charity. So it was the aim of the app was to engage kids in wildlife and environmental conservation, help them become virtual conservationists, but also support charities around the world. But after a few years, I started to have concerns about the impact of technology. I mean, this was 12 or 13 years ago, and how increasingly these technologies were addicting children. I ended up shutting down that app a few years ago. But what I think there's some really great technologies, and what I would have liked to do is incorporate citizen science. So citizen scientists are, unofficial scientists that go around, they take photos and collect data on the environment, on the world's species. And kids are doing this. So kids can go out with a phone, they take a photo of, say, a bird, and they can upload it to a platform like iBird, and it's helping scientists understand ecosystem health across the world. It's helping us understand species diversity, or how big a population size of a particular bird is. And it's been really, really powerful. I think citizen science has been probably one of the most powerful tools, conservation tools in the world. And there are kids that are heavily involved in this. So we've even had Australian kids who discovered a new species of insect, and they were recognised in an academic journal. So that's one way where technology can actually engage people, but also be a force for good. And then you've got other technologies, like there is whale sensor technologies that shipping companies can use to get an alert when they're approaching a whale so they can avoid collisions. We've got AI sensors that are helping us track and monitor wildlife, so that there is a huge amount of technology that is being used for good, all over the world for wildlife and the environment. But there are just high risks, and technology moves fast, and I don't think often the good can't keep up with the bad.
Yeah, it's fascinating. My mind was wandering. I was at a wedding on the weekend, my brother's wedding, and it was a little boy, his wife's nephew, and it was in Byron Bay and out on this beautiful balcony overlooking the beach. And that place is just teeming with wildlife, and whales are going past in the background, and dolphins. And just watching that day through the eye of the 5-year-old, he would find these lizards in the bush or a cuttlefish in his pocket. The young scientists, aren't they, born that way, that are just seeing stuff, and all he was seeing was nature. He wasn't interested in the wedding or anything else going on at all. And it's brilliant the way you described that, to encourage young people to sort of capture that, because they've got the best filter and the best eyes for it potentially, don't they?
And why do we lose that? it's the most beautiful quality to be curious, to open your eyes and look outside and to appreciate the world around you. It's these childlike qualities that we often lose, and I think we should just pay more attention to trying to retain those qualities, that curiosity and interest in the world.
Yeah, well said. Your book, Nature's Last Dance, it's an amazing piece of work that you've pulled together, and you read the storytelling part of it and science to capture the urgency of the environmental crisis, to use your language. What's your hope for the book? How do you hope people view the natural world after reading it?
I was hoping to make a nature book that could appeal to a mainstream audience. So at a very basic level, I hope it helps people fall in love with nature, because when people fall in love with something, they fight to protect it. And I hope that there's a story in there for everyone, no matter where you sit politically or socially. I think there is a story that will appeal to everybody. So I hope they go away with, I guess, a little bit more awareness and a little bit more interest in taking action, whether it's, investing in nature, thinking about nature different, advocating for nature policies, but at a base level, just falling a little bit in love with nature.
Natalie, your story is a great leadership story, and I genuinely feel privileged to sit down and understand whatever people's background is and how they find that passion and turn that into a sustained, successful life like yours has, and with many, many chapters, and I'm sure more books to go. And love the patterns that great leaders have. This idea that you can't really lead anyone else, Natalie, unless you lead yourself first, is something I'm always interested in. What do you do for yourself so that you can have the impact that you want to have?
When you say what I do for myself, you already know this is going to be not enough. It's like self-care.
Yeah, that idea of self-leadership, Natalie. Like some people, it is their exercise in the morning, or it is reading that book, or taking the time out, or that idea that you often hear that saying, you're putting the oxygen mask on yourself first so you can help the person next to you. There are things that you do that you know keep you healthy and well.
Yeah. Big one, outdoors. I love running trails. I like exploring trails. So I spend a lot of time outdoors, and even I'll have meetings outdoors if I've spent too much time inside. That's probably a big one. And reading. I mean, the ways that the things that bring me joy are those simple things that I think bring most people joy. It's being around my family and friends, having a sense of community, being outdoors with nature. I mean, I just spent the weekend with donkeys, and it was the best weekend outdoors, just surrounded by donkeys. I read my book to them. It was amazing. And reading. I just like curling up with a hard copy book in my hands. Just those simple things.
There is a huge outback donkey population in Australia, isn't there? I was out on a remote Indigenous community a few years ago, surrounded by donkeys. I had no idea. We've got camels everywhere in outback Australia. Can I ask where'd you find the donkeys? Where were you?
I was in Dungog. So my friend has a farm, and we went up and would just spend some. I like being around animals. I like being outdoors, and so we went to her farm. And it was, I think these donkeys were quite domesticated. They were really up in my face. At one point I was just surrounded by horses, cows, donkeys, and dogs, and I was in heaven. And so that's how I hone my leadership. That's how I fill my cup.
Are you a believer in, and I often feel this, if someone comes into the house and we've got our little dog, but they seem to read personality and character intuitively better than anyone else. Are you a believer in that? Do you think animals get it at a level we don't?
Yeah, big time. If my dog didn't, if a dog doesn't like someone, I immediately think, oh, there's something a bit off about that person. But you know what's really funny is, so when I was with my friend this weekend, I was saying that to her, and I said, if an animal doesn't like you or doesn't like someone, it makes you think there's something really wrong with that person. And then as I've said that, a goose ran up and attacked me, and it was quite humbling because I felt quite offended, but I was like, there is something, maybe there's something inherently off about me now. So I really ate my words.
It's a Classic story. Is there one piece of leadership advice, Natalie, that you've passed on or that you like to share the most?
Yes, it's a bit crude. I think everybody needs to wake up every morning and remind themselves not to be a wanker. I think it's the simple things, and I know it sounds silly, but it's something that I think you need, just as a human being, whether you're a leader or not, to practice. It's easy to be kind, but for some people you might need to practice it. Waking up every day, I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be someone that I'm proud of. I'm not going to be a wanker. I think that's like, if you start your day just saying, I'm not going to be a wanker, if everybody did that, I think it would be, a nice world.
I'm writing that at the top of my notebook today. That's the message of the year for me. And if you had 100 guesses, I wouldn't have suspected that was going to come out, Natalie. But you're right. If you do start there, it's not a bad place to be, is it? Probably leads to everything else. How you got to treat people and
just a wanker.
Exactly. You've simplified the whole. I don't know where to go next after that. It's genius. Your vision for the world is really special, and the way you've gone after trying to make a difference. Is there a way that you've thought about being able to share that vision? Has it been something you've really sat down and thought, how do I do that successfully with a greater audience?
Yeah, a big time. I think about it constantly, and it's always evolving. My book is probably the most refined attempt at trying to do that, and I outline steps and how we can engage people and what needs to shift. But I am constantly thinking about that. I don't know if I'm going to get it right, but I try, and I think most of the time I get support and I can bring people along because they know I'm passionate, they know I care. I like to work with other people and build communities. So I just think that we're in a time now where we need to be taking this back to the roots a little bit for social change, for environmental change, I think the answer very much lies with community, creating a sense of community. I think of this idealized future where people talk to your neighbor, that we've built walls. I mean, there's this beautiful quote that says, use your timber to build longer tables, not higher fences. And I think we really need to do that within our community. So that's what I'm going to try to do.
I love that. You use your timber to build longer tables rather than higher fences. Another piece of wisdom to share. I've heard you talk about your curiosity a lot already from the young age of being in nature and camping and curious about animals, and it's taken you on this path. We see people with success like yours as leaders are inherently curious. Can you share, is there a rabbit hole your curiosity's taken you down recently that something's piqued your interest on that you could share?
I am constantly down rabbit holes. I woke up the other night at midnight and I just got my phone out and I was like, I wonder if the Chinese military is actually bigger than the US military, and should I look into this? Is there like a conspiracy here? And so I go down rabbit holes all the time. So there's two that I'm down at the moment. One is becoming an advocate for ugly animals. So we have a real problem in that we have what's called charismatic megafauna, and they are the big, beautiful species like pandas that everybody loves, and they grace the covers of magazines and they get lots of funding. By contrast, species like, say, a vulture, which is not universally considered beautiful, does not get as much funding, does not get as much attention. But the vulture is incredibly important. So in India, I think this was in the 90s, the vulture populations began to crash by, I think, 99%. And what had happened was vets were giving this drug to cattle, and when vultures were feeding on the carcasses of the cattle, they were being killed by that drug. Anyway, the government fixed the problem, and the vets stopped using that drug once they found out. But the vulture populations, because they'd declined so much, it had already caused catastrophic damage in India. 500,000 people died as a result of the vulture's decline, and it cost the economy hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's because vultures are nature's cleanup crew. When they feast on these carcasses, they're preventing the spread of disease. And so I want to be an advocate for ugly animals, that we need to be recognising these wide variety of species and not just donating to the species that we find pretty, but recognising that the health of our environment depends on these fragile relationships, insects and strange birds and vultures as well as pandas. So that's one of my rabbit holes. And my other one was I wanted to get Joe Rogan into nature.
That's a great ambition, isn't it? And what a great story too, the delicate nature, isn't it, of just how, as you described then, the important role a vulture plays, or every insect in every part of it. And he's got a powerful voice, Joe Rogan, hasn't he? It's, it strikes me as someone who does care. So that's a connection would be good to get you on. So you start at the very lowest level talking to me, and then there's a chance that that's exactly right. So I love it. You're a great communicator, and you've got and a great ability to tell your stories. You can just hear it in your voice. Have you thought about the way you communicate your message?
Yes, I have. In this book, I agonised over it towards it, like in the editing phase, because I tend to be passion-led, and then I go back and reflect and think, okay, how can I do that better next time? But I do think about how I communicate. I say what I believe is true, but I also want to be able to resonate. I think about how my messages might resonate with people because I genuinely want them to have the most impact. And I always am thinking, what is the outcome of this? So even if you might look at, if some people are yelling at each other, you know how people yell at each other a lot in the comment sections of social media. And I just sometimes think, what outcome are we looking for here? When if we're yelling at somebody or, scolding somebody on a comments or cancelling somebody or whatever we might be doing, what is the outcome we're looking for? And it's not to say that those things are wrong. It's just to say, if I was going to yell at somebody on social media, which I don't do, but if I was going to, I would have an outcome in mind. What does this mean for the system? What does this mean for the world? So I think like big picture. What sort of world am I creating? The actions that I do on a day-to-day basis, I see them as a vote. And it is a vote to the sort of world that I'm creating. So who I follow on social media, who I engage with, the things that I say, I am voting to create a particular world. And what particular world do I want? And I want a world that is kinder, more empathetic, that has a healthy environment, and where kids can thrive. And so I try, my actions sort of guided by that.
It's a great way to think again, and I love it, isn't it? Every time that you maybe do click on a clickbait style story, you are sort of voting for that to continue, or every time you engage in something, even out of frustration, even if you're not in unison with it, you are essentially, I suppose, voting with your audience that you're giving people. So yeah, you're right, isn't it? It's a interesting and again, profound way to think. Natalie, who's been the greatest leader in your life?
A woman who's my mentor, and now she's sort of like my second mum. Her name's Judy Slatcher. She's the former CEO of Red Cross and Lonely Planet, and now she's the president of WWF. But aside from all of those things, she's one of the kindest, most beautiful people I've ever met. She's the person that we go for walks and she just picks up litter along the way. She finds joy everywhere. Every morning she sends me photos of the sunrise. She loves going into the ocean and, looking for cuttlefish. And so she finds joy, but she's also on a mission to make the world a better place. And she's always kind. She wants to give other people a voice. She always listens. And so when I met her, I thought she's somebody that she's a bit of a role model. So I'm going to force her to be my friend. And I did.
Successfully. And what a great thing to be able to acknowledge that. And it's a question I love asking for that reason. We might have already got the answer to this final question. We're a bit obsessed with collaboration, Natalie, and what happens when inspiring people get together and the sum of the parts being greater, and particularly people with different backgrounds. And so fascinating, diving into your world, understanding your passion today around, has there been someone, Joe Rogan aside now, that you thought, God, I'd love to collaborate with that person on your passion for nature and the environment, or any of your passions? Is there another name that maybe springs to mind?
It's sort of everybody. I don't know of a particular person. I do know that I'm very conscious of being in an echo chamber, and I would like to work more with the communities that I might not have had a big role in. I would like to work with people who think really differently from me. I don't know if it's one particular person, because now that I've said Joe Rogan, all I can think is Joe Rogan.
Well, I actually love your answer, and I wanted to pause and give you some more think time, but it's sort of everybody is almost the perfect answer, because it probably sums up what you're trying to achieve, is getting everybody to care about nature the way that you do, and we all should be united by it. Is as you said, whatever you think the creation or the problem or the solution is, it's thought-provoking to sit down and listen to you. Congratulations on everything you're doing, Natalie. It's an amazing contribution you're making. I love your approach to it. I love that you're trying to bring people along rather than blame and shame, and you've got me thinking more deeply today on the back of it. And Nature's Last Dance is a book we all should read and all should get hold of, and thanks for taking the time to share it with us today.
Thank you so much, Luke.